Hi, everyone. Welcome to this edition of Hiring Diaries, the definitive resource for best practices for hiring professionals. Today, we are meeting Mahesh Balasubramanian. Mahesh is the regional lead for Aon Assessment Solutions, Southeast Asia. So, what things do you think have remained relatively consistent in behavioral assessments or personality assessments over the past decades? And what do you think has changed over time?
There are three things which is very important when we look at assessments, right? One is the science, the reliability, validity factor of it, and that has not changed. Years have gone by where clients do come to us and ask these pertinent questions in terms of the reliability, validity factor of the tools. Does it measure what it is supposed to measure as such? So that has not changed. Clients are coming back to us and asking us in terms of how reliable and valid some of those tools are. But what I see has changed is the employee experience. Gone are the days where the pen and paper kind of an assessments would work. Today as we speak, we have the Gen Z coming into the workforce. What has become important is in terms of, do we have tools which enhances employee experience? How do we create a positive candidate experience? And I think that is going to be driving in terms of how we create products, how do we attract, how do we retain, and how do we ensure we give an environment to people to experience the kind of job they get into, and how does it fit their individual goals, needs, aspirations as such. And I see that shift happening. The third and most important part is the analytics side of it. One thing what I have observed personally is clients are looking at data in a much more meaningful manner. How do you interpret those insights which come out of the assessment process, and simplifying it, ensuring that everybody understands the report, gets the best use of in terms of the human predictability side of it. I think that these are two areas which is driving the industry as such.
Fantastic to hear that. No, it's good to hear that certain things are timeless, like consistency and, of course, validity of the assessment. What do you think is the impact of new technologies like artificial intelligence on, the area of personality assessments? Is it a positive impact in your opinion, or is the jury still out on it?
We are still at a decent stage. It is also important in terms of how do you bring in the human touch as such. But what I foresee in the next few years as such, AI is going to be playing a very important part, because one of the things which is very important is in terms of the adverse impact or the fairness to candidates, and using AI as one of the tools to hire in terms of your early talent as such has been showing a lot of impact. And I believe it is going to continue to stay in the market, but it's important, how do we evolve, how do we ensure that we train AI in such a manner that the results what we get is holistic in nature.
And maybe just for my knowledge and maybe for the audience as well, are the methods to validate assessment also changing as new technologies come in?
Yes, gone are the days, when you look at assessments only from a cognitive point of view. There are a lot of new age assessments which are coming into play now. For example, the personality instrument has been changing and has been evolving as such. So we have our own personality instrument, which is called ADEPT. One of the advantages of ADEPT is adaptive in nature, because you don't expect a candidate to go through the same set of questions repeated, for the 20 minutes as such. And what we've done at our backend is, even our personality instrument, we have made it adaptive in nature, because the next question, which typically a candidate answers, depends on the response which he or she has given in the last question as such. Apart from that, there are a lot of other instruments like a situational judgment questionnaire, and how do you kind of make it more adaptive in terms of attracting the younger audience as such. And there are multiple other tools, which we have in our repository, which is gamified in nature. So there is a combination of a lot of new age tools which are coming into the market, and which helps in terms of both the prediction as well as the positive candidate experience, which I spoke about. And I see that's how is going to be in terms of where the future of assessments is.
So what do you think is the most difficult thing about getting assessments right?
What essentially becomes important is, I like to divide this phase into, three parts. One is in terms of defining the success profile. What is that? What are those skills? What are those attributes? What are those behaviors we are typically looking at from a candidate point of view? Until and unless that part is very clear and crystallized, there's no point looking at assessments as such. Once you cross the step one, it's also about using the right set of tools, which will help you measure those specific behaviors, what is important from that particular job context as such. And once that is done, it's also about reporting. How do you ensure that you get the right report, and how do you interpret those reports in a very meaningful manner, and then take those decisions as such. So this is from a process point of view. What is also important to do a validation exercise, and this is something which you could do it before you launch the assessments, in terms of the internal validation, running past those assessments to with your internal audience, or with people who perform very well in their jobs, and get a sense in terms of, does the tools measure what it is supposed to measure. And we've been working with a lot of organizations, not only supporting them in terms of selecting the right assessment tools, but also, go back every year, do those validation exercise, and ensure that, the people who they've hired, they've been performing well, and we do some kind of a correlation exercise in terms of the tool helping them hire the right set of candidates as such.
What is that attitude that you think people talk about? It almost sounds like a nebulous concept, but can assessments really measure this attribute that people talk about?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Like I always believe, hard skills can be taught, but soft skills is something which is ingrained, and you need to work really hard to develop on that. Now, as we understand, like businesses have evolved, things have changed. Now we are seeing today, like every company is a digital company, and in terms of traditional careers have changed. You can't expect individuals to work in an organization for 15-20 years time and slowly wait for that growth to come in. So some of the aspects now, the way things have changed, areas like resilience, areas like problem solving, areas like dealing in an ambiguous situation. How do you come out of it? How do you manage stressful situations? So these are certain skills. It has become extremely important in terms of how do you kind of change. And today, like, you can't predict anything, right? Because you work on a business plan for 6 months, and then you see that in the first 3 months itself things change. So how do you adapt to that kind of an environment? So these are certain skills which organizations today are really focusing on. People who could come in, adapt well, have that resilience, ability to deal with multiple things, problem solving. These are certain skills which I see, irrespective of what role you are in. And these are areas which organizations extremely value in terms of the candidates they are looking at.
So when you talk to organizations, I'm sure you find that different organizations mean different things by the attitude they're looking for. What are some of the examples, if you could share?
Problem solving skills, ability to learn, unlearn. Having a good learning agility curve also becomes extremely important, and being patient, like in terms of how do you go about contributing to the work areas, as well as the changing organizational needs as such. So that is something which I see, but again, it all depends on unique roles. What are those areas? And again, from an assessment point of view, and it's also important that how flexible your data is. how flexible your assessments is, because you need to give those results in terms of have that flexibility in terms of how do you interpret, give those data sets to the organization so that they can use the data set accordingly, and hire people who they would see that fit into the organizational context as such.
Thank you so much for that. I think that's really helpful, because every time people talk about attitude, I'm thinking you probably need different kind of attitude attributes than another organization does. So people start to, I think, bucket a lot of things together when they mean when they say attitude. Um, I guess the other thing that I'm really curious about is, you sort of changed markets recently, and you were operating in South Asia, largely in India, and now you're operating in Southeast Asia. What have you seen in terms of adoption and understanding of the area of assessments by the organizations in both these regions?
Yeah. So having experienced, both these regions as such, some of the things which I see a lot of commonality between, what I used to do in India as well as Southeast Asia is, and is the candidate experience which I spoke about. Spending more time ensuring that candidates are positively engaged with an assessment program, which helps to reduce drop off and supports the employer brand. So that is pretty much consistent, and what is also consistent is on the mobile platform. Today, a lot of organizations, in fact, literally every organizations are looking at assessments, tools and processes which are mobile friendly. Gone are the days where you expect, candidates to come into your office or a room, go through those assessments as such, because they want something which is intuitive. They can take it in their own sweet time or place. And that is something which is remain very consistent as such. Bots, that is something which I've been hearing, and you know that more than me in terms of how AI bots can be used to navigate candidates through in terms of the entire employer page, and how they go about kind of applying for the right job which fits into their DNA as such. Online video interviews, this is again an area where we see a lot of traction, and I've seen so many organizations evolve in the last 2 to 3 years, where you hire a candidate without actually having a face-to-face interview. It's not only from important from a candidate point of view, even the recruiters or the line people, how comfortable they are, conducting online interviews and ensuring that, they hire the right set of candidates basis purely an online environment as such. Um, Areas like gamification, you can't expect someone to spend 90 minutes 120 minutes going through multiple assessments. How do you gamify some of those assessments? And that is something which Aon has been leading in terms of building certain tools which are gamified in nature, and that's something which I believe will are very consistent in both the markets as such. And like I had spoken about, certain new technologies like AI, the evidence behind it, is it something which is still marketed very well, or it actually predicts performance? Yeah, and that is something which I guess there will be continuous effort in terms of ensuring that some of the tools which we speak about helps you hire the right set of people. But more or less, when I look at some of these aspects, it's very similar in nature, both in India as well as Southeast Asia. Last aspect, which I believe is become very important, is in terms of the feedback. Today, candidates, once they go through an assessment process, they are expecting some kind of an output. And in terms of how they have performed, how could they use the assessment results to improve in terms of the areas of strengths or development opportunity. And that's something which I see very consistent between both the markets as such.
Are there differences in where organizations are in their journey of adoption across the two markets?
Yes, I see at least at a leadership level, um, organizations in India do conduct a thorough and holistic assessment and development centers as such. I see a lot of traction in the Southeast Asia market, especially at a junior and mid management level. People do use assessment tools to hire effectively. But at a granular level, I think both these markets are very similar in nature. Some Southeast Asia looks at a lot of new age solutions, the adoption or acceptance of technology like AI and chatbots to video interviews is something which most organizations have already moved on. In India, it's taking time. Traditional organizations have still not reached that particular juncture as such, but as we speak, there is huge progress in both the markets as such.
What would be your advice for any organization starting to look into assessments as a way to increase the accuracy of their hiring?
Uh, so there are a lot of benefits, when you're looking at, using assessments as such. One of the most important thing, what I like to believe is, prediction of performance. If we've done a lot of studies in terms of how using assessments can actually predict job performance. And one of the easiest ways in terms of, like I had spoken about it, in terms of the whole validation exercise, and that's something, you know, which is an easy way to start. You also need to understand in terms of creating that positive candidate experience, right? Like, today you want to give that gist to every candidate who's applying for a job. What is that he or she could expect once the person joins it. So, and assessments tools like a situational judgment questionnaire gives you those insights for a candidate to expect what they can get. And we've also spoken about areas like fairness. Like DE&I is also becoming a huge kind of an issue in markets, in developed markets like US, Europe, as well as Southeast Asia. And assessments do give that perspective in terms of how do you give equal opportunity to all groups as such, and they also get that confidence in terms of how the assessment process kind of helps them in terms of getting an understanding of whether that person is fit to join the organization or not. And the last piece of it is return on investment. Like, it's end of the day, how much do you want to spend your ROI or energy on getting the right fit? Because we all know a cost of a bad hire, or the attrition levels, how much of an impact it has on the financials. So it's important to use these tools to ensure that you follow the right set of process, you hire people with the right fit, and in the long run, definitely it has that impact on the ROI as such.
So, what's the easiest when, assuming that using assessments over a few years and back testing data, that's how you get the most ROI? But what's an easy win that somebody could start with?
Uh, so one of the easiest ways, there are a lot of standardized off-the-shelf tools, which is available, and Aon has plenty of them. It's just about reaching out to the right vendor, understanding in terms of what are the basic tools they could use, and it's just about starting that. Once you get a gist of it, hang of it, in terms of how do you use some of the scores to hire better, conduct better interviews, you can start. So there's no rocket science today. Most of the organizations are customizing certain tools to their context, but a lot of organizations do use off-the-shelf assessment tools as such. So it's all about using the right set of tools, understanding in terms of what each tool does. Like, for example, personality gives you an individual's work preferences. You could use that as an input to hire people with their own preferences as such. A good cognitive tool gives you an understanding of someone's raw intelligence. And if that is important for you to evaluate in a particular job context, you could use that tool to filter or sift, or hire people with higher raw intelligence scores as such. There are tools like situational judgment questionnaires. There are tools like BEI. It gives you in terms of more on the primary evidence side of it, right? In terms of how will the person perform once he or she joins the organization as such. So it's all the combination of different tools. Every tool has its own objective to fulfill. It's about how do you use it, kind of mix it around and see how you select the right candidates as such.
And maybe my final question. So, what are some of the top questions that an organization or a buyer should be asking when they're trying to select the right assessment tool?
Yeah, so I always like to believe, assessment is more about science and less of art. You can have all the fancy tools, you can have all the gamifications of it, but end of it, what is important, does it measure what it is supposed to measure? So what is important is look at tools which has high science and the factor of reliability and validity of it. That's very important. Second is in terms of the candidate experience. I come back to that, because, as we speak, we have the Gen Z coming into the workforce. It's important that, they experience the tool which they can resonate very well. So that's number two. And in number three, in terms of what's the impact and the ROI, do your validation, see, you're getting those right results, what you're expecting. And it's a journey. I wouldn't say that there's a quick fix to any of it. It's a journey. And once you start embarking on this journey, in the long run, you'll definitely see a lot of value.
Fantastic. No, that's really good advice. Thank you so much, Mahesh, for your time today. It's been a pleasure talking to you. And of course, we'll catch up separately as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. Have a good day.
My pleasure.